Yes, very good afternoon to you all. It's good to be back. Goeiemiddag almal. Dis lekker om weer terug te wees by julle. Today I'm going to talk to you about racism or xenophobia. So please remember to press the like button, share, subscribe, and press the notification button for our future and latest videos. Right, if you all can remember well, I always talk about why do we make these videos? Well, it's to place on record forgotten history, correcting forgotten history and distorted history. And then, of course, for our future generations to deliberate and to dialogue about these happenings and as to why and how we got here today and why we are in the situation that we're in. Also, the reason for these videos is to keep in touch with you and for you to realize that we aren't just talking and we're not just talkers and that we do exist and that we are there for you. Also, to create hope for you, the listener, that you know that you're wanted with us as the political and the business space and environment is pushing you away out of all forms of ownership and existence. And of course, as you know, it's not an easy task at hand to do this. In many ways, they're known, but it has to be done without emotion and result. Right, so today I'm going to touch on racism or xenophobia. And again, it's for you to decide your own thinking. Remember, I'm only giving you my opinion and my observations. It's still for you to decide what you think. Many people use different words, and I feel that maybe educating would be a harsh word, or informing you or telling you, but maybe educating is the right word. To educate you on the truth as evaluated from a different angle. Right, so let's look at what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to look at the definition of racism, xenophobia, and the causes. I'm going to look at the human rights speech by the President Cyril Ramaphosa, just very, very quickly summarized. Also, the Human Rights Day speech by Julius Malema, also quickly summarized. Then I want to talk about black on black racism, xenophobia, just a few examples. Black on white racism, xenophobia, a few examples. And of course, white on black racism, xenophobia, and a few examples. And of course, as usual, some summary and closure. And then, of course, decision time. But I think before I start with this topic, let me tell you that I'm not a racist. And I would like to share a few examples. In the school that I attended in Klerksdorp, I was in a class with Muslims and Hindus and Christians, blacks, whites, and coloreds. And that was my schooling, my last 2 years of schooling. Thereafter, I went into the forces and I had a lot of MK and upper troops and ranking officers and NCOs, non-commissioned officers, and we all got on well. There was mutual respect, and of course, we all had to do what we needed to do. I think I remember in those days we did a lot of riot control and strikes and such issues. Also in business, just coming back to the forces, there are also senior MK officers that know me well, and they can also say that I'm not racist. So with that also added, going into business, I've got B partners, male and female, that know that I'm not racist. So it's important that I mention this because I'm going to touch a couple of things here. It's very touchy and very sensitive, and you need to know that I'm very neutral when I discuss these matters. And also in the 20 years of business, I've had hundreds of employees, if not a couple of thousand, over the 20 years. And they know me well, along with the unions, like the Food and Allied Workers Union. I've worked with them for 5-7 years, and they also know me well, and they also know that I am not a racist. I have neighbors and domestic workers also that can confirm that I'm not a racist. So I'm starting off by discussing this issue from a neutral basis and a neutral approach. All right, so let's look at the definition of racism. Then we look at xenophobia and the causes thereof. And the source I'm using is obviously the internet and various Oxford Dictionary definitions. So if you look at the definition of racism, I'm going to read it to you, is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. So if we look at this sentence and we look at membership, then we're looking at the RET forces and the ANC and the FF. And then between those parties, there's serious prejudice, discrimination, and antagonism directed against one another. And if we look at the definition as well, we see racial issues where obviously it's self-explanatory. We have blacks, whites, Indians, and coloreds. Again, there one can see in our society there's prejudice, discrimination, antagonism directed against one another. And of course, in the same definition, we're talking about ethnic groups, and there we have Zulus and the Xhosas and the Zimbabweans. As we've experienced now of late with the foreigners in business in South Africa, there's prejudice, discrimination, antagonism directed to one another. And of course, of late, we know Operation Dudula is in operation in all over the country with foreigners that are taking up the local jobs. So here we see a black-on-black racism, and that's as per definition. So it's not just a question of the racism is with whites. It's not. It's black on black and black on white. But we'll go into that in detail shortly. So then, of course, on xenophobia, if we look at what the dictionary says, it is a stress disease of fear and hatred of strangers or foreigners. Whereas racism has a broader meaning, set, including a brief or a belief that the racial differences produce the inherent, a belief in the superiority of a particular race. So although they are similar, they are different enough that it is possible for one to be both xenophobic and racist. So that is the definition and summary to cover racism and xenophobia. So further then, why do foreigners take jobs from South African nationals? Well, let me tell you, I think it's because the wage demand of the South African nationals is unrealistic and that the economy can't carry that wage demand. There's no growth, and foreigners seem to have a better attitude when applying for work in business. I think that's a big reason why foreigners are getting the jobs, and they don't have issues, they don't have attitudes. And of course, they don't belong to any unions. Right, so let's look at prejudice and discrimination. It's also in the lines of racism and xenophobia. I want to read the definition here. It's a liking or dislike for one rather than another, especially without good reason. So you can see this this whole package deal, terminology differences that is here, but they're all one and alike. That is affecting our racial parameters. Right. So if I look here at the causes for racism and xenophobia, there are three socio-economic causes. The one is unemployment. Now, I was looking at some statistics of late, and I see here that there's 42% South Africans unemployed. 42%. And if you look at this with the ones that are not working, the unemployment levels are at 46.6%. Now, just on the youth alone, we have an unemployment rate of 66.5%. And these statistics were taken on the 9th of February of 2022. Further, your unemployment constitutes a massive social problem, and we're looking at two-thirds of the South African economy, people don't work. And this is a massive red light. Two-thirds of our people don't have work, can't work, sitting at home, and of course, they take part in all sorts of um, other issues in the country that keep them busy. Now, if we look at the poverty, we're looking at 55.5%. That's almost 31 million people that are living in poverty. And we're only 60 plus million people in South Africa, so over half are unemployed, no food, no housing, and uh, live below the poverty line. We have a 25%, almost 14 million people that actually have no food at all, and they have to steal to eat. So unemployment and poverty is contributing to the socio-economic causes for racism and xenophobia, and you can include discrimination and prejudice which runs with it. The last point that contributes to the socio-economic issues in our country is the inadequate or lack of service delivery, which is mostly attributed to the political problem, our political leaders. Which adds on then to the municipalities that I'd like to mention. We have close to 300 municipalities, to be exact, 278 municipalities. They comprise of about 8 metropolitan areas, 44 districts, and 226 local municipalities. But what's interesting here in our municipal areas is according to the data published by the National Treasury, these municipal areas or governments, they get 70 billion rands per annum to keep going, keep them on the run. But what's interesting here is that the municipalities have become consumers and they're not producers. In other words, government or the National Treasury is giving the municipalities 70 billion per annum just to be there, whereas it should actually be the other way around. The municipality should be generating money and paying government, but government's giving the municipalities money, and this is what happens: is that the ANC then obviously want a state of dependency, which also runs in line with the weak education we have, and our youth development programs are not happening. All right, so who's to blame for this? Who gets the blame for all this unemployment, poverty, service delivery? Again, you heard on the human rights um, speeches, it's whites. And because the ANC and their affiliates um, are not publicly announcing their failures in leadership and management and accountability and responsibility, they smartly divert this to the whites, and that there's a capitalistic business system in the country, and that's why there's high unemployment. Right, so let's look at the human rights speech by President Cyril Ramaphosa in March of this year, 2022. Firstly, I think it's important to note that the president has to be the president for the people of South Africa. But President Cyril Ramaphosa's actions is not showing that. His actions are showing that he's the president for the ANC party, but not as president for all its people, black, white, Indian, and colored. Now, can you imagine if he was a president for all the people, how big the ANC could get? But no, he's only the president for the ANC party. And there's three things I've picked up in his speech on the 21st of March, and I'm going to mention it here, is one is the promoting of political white hatred incidents, of which took place in Koster 14 years ago. Why this is mentioned on a public platform on Human Rights Day is beyond me. I mean, who writes his speeches? And does Cyril actually proofread his speeches before he actually starts talking? Because it doesn't unite the people in the country, and it keeps bringing up past illnesses, and it's not nation building. Second thing I picked up is that He mentioned there's no place in society for humiliation, which I've covered earlier, and that he made a pledge that humiliation must stop. And this runs in line with unemployment. The humiliation must be with the ANC party and not with whites. Further, he talks about democracy, the South African Constitution, that there's no place for uh, humiliation by certain groups. But again, I can say to you that humiliation is from the ANC party themselves because the country's in a bad way. There's unemployment, there's high crime, etc., etc. And also, lastly, the racism, he said, is still alive in South Africa. Yes, it is. If we look at Operation Dudula, it's black on black. That's racism. That's xenophobic. There's various statements on public platform that's been promoted against nation building. So, what's our observations from the speech that was taken or was discussed on the 21st of March? We see diversion tactics by President Cyril Ramaphosa under the umbrella of humiliation. Um, the ANC are hiding their failures to govern and unite South Africa. They're still promoting the hate crimes on public platforms. Speeches promote discrimination and prejudice against minority groups. And actually, what we can see here is the ANC is still a problem. And they have actually humiliated themselves badly for having the country's unemployment figures at two-thirds, almost two-thirds, and that all state-owned enterprises can't deliver any services. So that's basically the three matters and aspects I can pick up with President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech. It's the promoting of political white hatred incident that took place 14 years ago. There's no place in society for humiliation, but there's more aimed on the minority groups being the white people. And of course, that racism is still alive, but it's actually not coming from us. It's more black on black. Now, if I look at the human rights speech by Julius Malema, I can see that the SABC television station is funded by government for that specific broadcast. And of course, he keeps talking about fighting for freedom when the country's been run by the ANC for the past 27 years. So what they want to fight for freedom for is also beyond all of us. Mentioning that farm workers get paid in alcohol, this is total distortion of the truth. Again, is promoting racial division when political leaders should be uniting the nation and winning votes. He mentioned the AfriForum court case. Instead of saying kill the Boer, he said kiss the Boer. See, there's manipulation there. And he gets away with it. After that, on camera, AfriForum court case matter, Julius Malema should have been locked up, but he's still on public platform promoting racial division, and again funded by the government, being the SABC television station. Also, Malema mentioned about supporting Russia. Russia gave arms during the apartheid years, and that they equipped them with AK-47s. Well, Russia displaced 10 million people last month, and I would want to mention to displace 5 million of us would or would not carry the same attitude by the FFANC. Something to think about. I also picked up on the comments in that broadcast by an African American, and it looks like the African Americans have got the same problem with the whites in America by saying that the people in America, the black people in America, must take back America from the colonialists, and that the country was stolen from them. You see, it's become an international problem, this racial issues. It's totally abused. Right, so what's our observations and deductions on these two speeches by the President and President Cyril Ramaphosa and, of course, Julius Malema? Is the promotion of hatred and division, and obviously it's supported or sponsored by government funds. That continues ongoing. Looking at black on black racism, xenophobic discrimination and prejudice, a few examples I've already mentioned. Dudula, and the meaning of Dudula is to repel, to repulse, to beat back, and to drive back. That is what Dudula means. Also, black on black racism, xenophobic, you can see it between the black political parties, the ANC, the RT, EFF, and BLF, the ongoing fighting, and political assassinations that we hear on a weekly basis. And of course, the July riots is a perfect example of where over 300 of our South Africans were killed and billions were lost. And who's to blame for that? Well, that will come out, I'm sure, later, who's accountable and responsible for that mess. Part of black on black racism and xenophobia is the 66%, 2/3 unemployment figures in the country, no job creation, and of course, service delivery absence in all townships and other areas. Look at black on white racism, xenophobia, discrimination, and prejudice examples already mentioned. We have B structures and fine policies. We have transformation laws and fine policies. We have labor equity plans that are unrealistic. The expropriation of land without compensation policy. We've had black on white racism, xenophobia. We've had farm murders, over 3,000, almost 3,500 farm murders since 1994. Obviously, there is racism in the forces, in the South African Police Services and in the Defence Force in terms of discrimination where there's promotion favorites. People don't get promoted and they go for long periods of time in a rank. And also what's important is our judicial system and the outcome of cases and matters. If we just take recent Malema Afriforum case on camera, he's still promoting racial hatred with no action by the state. So that's black on white racism, xenophobia. If I look at white on black racism, xenophobia, discrimination, and prejudice, there are examples in the past we know well, before 94, with ablutions with schools, churches, and workplaces. But after 1994, when we signed that constitution, limited instance of white on black racism has taken place. Very, very few. Right, so in summary and closure then, I want to place on record that whites aren't promoting racism in this country. It's the black elite that's in power, that's creating the racism, that's creating the xenophobic actions that are pushing and promoting discrimination and prejudice. There's TV footage that we've seen of late. It's funded by the government, money primarily, and I would like you all then in closure to keep up communicating with one another. Use that 10-10-10 policy where 10 people tell 10 people, and those 10 people tell another 10 people. And that's the only way we can get this message out, that everybody gets to think, put their thinking caps on, and start asking questions. And then lastly, to close then, is decision time. It's very important in these trying times that we need to unite and join. As mentioned many times before, life still continues. You keep working, you keep doing your thing. You still have your braais, but you still need a plan in times of anarchy. And that's why I want you to seriously consider joining the Suidlanders and Suidland Defense, or Suidland Verdediging. They have a national emergency plan initiative that kicks into place when the government cannot guarantee your safety by any means at all. And as I always say, just do it. The links are below the footage. Follow the links through and it'll take you through the process. Kindly again, please like, share on all possible available platforms, subscribe, and press the notification button for new videos. I'm looking forward to talking to you all again soon. Stay well, stay safe, keep sharp. Tot ziens en geniet die